All right, this week I want to talk about work planes, the axes, work axes, and points, work points, and we use these things to create to give us a sketching plane or a sketching look direction for some rather complex and complicated parts. And the most common is going to be the work plane. The axis and the points are they're more uncommon. They're still there and they're still usable. And in some of the more complex shapes in some of the future classes, you'll see me demonstrate using points and axes. Now this is different from a sketch point when we talk about the point here. And so I've got just a kind of an unusual shape here put together to demonstrate some of these things with. And so I'll start with the point, and if you look at them here, you can see the different options. And honestly, you're just going to have to try these things out to see how they work. Okay. The most common, of course, is just going to be the point, and it's going to be wherever you put it. Okay. They're kind of difficult to move once you get them in place. The grounded point, it it starts out differently. You pick a vertex, and so I'll pick this corner right here, and then you get an icon of which way that you want the thing to move. And as it is right now, pretty sure this is the distance away from the 0 point, and if you want to move it, you could type in your numbers there, or you can grab the arrows and move it where you want it. And so if that's not where you want it, then you could type in the numbers. Yeah, I don't know, 3. And then it places your point where you want it. That one's a little bit different, okay? I'll take that one out. Now, an axis is just that. It's like an X, Y, or a Z axis, okay? And the most common that I have seen these is using like this one through 2 points. And like I said, these are not quite so common, okay? But you'll see sometimes on the work plane, we need an axis in order to create the plane that we need. And so you just select the ones which you want. They're pretty self-explanatory, if you will, okay? Now the planes, you've got several different options, okay, of different ones to make. And before I start it, I want to turn on my original planes here. And so I'm just going to select all of these right here and right click and turn on visibility so that all of my planes and all of my axes and my center point is already located there. Okay. The most common is going to be offset from plane. And so you select where it can be an existing work plane. It could be the edge of the object, doesn't matter. And then you could tell it a distance. I'm going to say minus 0.5, and that'll move it back in the opposite direction. Or you could grab the little arrow right there and you could drag it. Now, the reason for creating a work plane is that you need a sketch that's not on one of the existing planes that you already have. And so I could start a 2D sketch on that plane right there. I'm just going to make it simple with a rectangle here. And then I could extrude that. Let's go the other direction 1 inch. Okay. And so that gives you an idea of how that worked. Okay, so the quickest way would be to create a work plane that goes right there. And then it shows up in your browser tree right here as work plane number 1 in an extrusion 4. All right, so let me back out of that. That's the most common. The other is at an angle to a plane around an edge. And so what you do is you pick a plane and an edge. So I'm just gonna pick the end of it there again, and then I'm gonna pick that top edge of the object, and we'll say 45 degrees. No, I want negative 45 degrees. There we go. And so now you can see it created this work plane at a 45-degree angle right along that edge. And then I could do a sketch on that plane, and it flips up so that I can see it. I can project that geometry on there, or I could just go right ahead and start sketching there. And now I'll flip back around here so you can see, and if I extrude that, there's my shape that I get, okay? So you're gonna see a lot of different things over the next few courses as to how, planes are gonna be really good to help you. The mid plane, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's in the middle angle. 3 points, you would pick three points existing, like 3 different corners of your object, and it would create a work plane through there. 2 coplanar edges, that's pretty self-explanatory. And it created the plane that went through those 2 corners. Tangents are a little bit trickier, okay, in that you need an edge for them to work on this particular one. So let's look at this one, tangent to surface through an edge. And so I'll choose that surface there, and I can pick that edge right there, and it would be tangent to my circle, but going through that edge point. Now I cannot pick out here because there's nothing there to create that. If I were to do a sketch there and create a line, I could use that. So it would be tangent to that point, or any point in here. So you can see that it goes through that. It goes through that edge, through that point, but it's tangent to my circle that I have here. Tangent to a surface parallel to a plane. That one gets used pretty good. So we'll go parallel to that, but tangent here. So that gives you an offset out to there. So you can see there's several different ways of using these things. And some of them use a line or an axis, and some of them use a point. Honestly, you just got to play around with them to see how they work. And I've seen several parts, if you will, to where I had to create an angled plane, like to establish the angle that I need from here. So let's demonstrate that one again. Angle to a plane around an edge, and I said minus 45. And then we'll say my whatever I'm sketching starts out here, but it's at a 45-degree angle to that part, and it comes back. And so now I would take and do an offset from this one. It'll come out 1 inch, and so there's my plane, and then I can do a sketch on that plane, and I can project the geometry this top surface onto it. And then that yellow outline, if you look here, it's the corners of that stuff projected up onto this work plane, but it's perpendicular to the work plane that I created here. And so now I could do my sketch there and extrude that. And if I just tell it a distance, it just goes that certain distance. If I go 2 and choose that surface, it'll go all the way to that surface, okay? So that's another way of dealing with that. Depends on how your object you're drawing is created. I could have done it off of this one. It'd be a little bit more complicated. Well, one way I could have done it, and no need to project that geometry here since that plane goes right through there. And then if I extrude that, I could choose my asymmetric extrusion and tell it, okay, so 1 inch out, and let's see, how does 0.75 look going in? It needs to be more. Still needs to be more. And it's okay to go further into the object, except for you see right down here where it actually goes too far. And so that's something that you would have to pay attention to if you're going to use this type. And so we would say, okay, there. And if it gets confusing with these things, you can just hide these work planes. That's not a problem. So there's another way of doing that. Some of the exercises that you're going to have require ribs or webs, and there is a web tool, and it's sometimes complicated to use. So a lot of times the best way to deal with that is to make you a work plane that's in the center of where your web would be and do a sketch on it. And if you haven't seen it yet, in some of the videos, if you slice your graphics in a sketch, the buttons here or F7 on the keyboard, it slices your model wherever your sketch plane is. Okay, and so now here I'm going to put me a circle in, and I'm going to say 1.5, and I want to make it tangent. It's not picking up my edge. Project geometry. I'm going to do project slice, cut edges. Now I should be able to constrain that to there and then that to there. Okay, this is not a very good example of the rib, but if you only had a certain thickness that you wanted it, I mean, you could use a fillet tool, but it would fillet that whole thing across there. And so if I extrude, and I just want to pick that little piece right there, and I'm going to go symmetric, and we'll say 0.5. Okay, it's not a great example of a rib or a web, but that's the process, okay? And honestly, I think that, let me look at my notes here. That covers a lot of the stuff that you'll be dealing with in some of these sketches with creating work planes. And like I said, these things can get a little confusing when you've got them all there, so you can hide them. It's no big deal. Yeah, so that, what can I say? I've demonstrated several of these things. Like I said, you're just gonna have to play with them and see how they work. Some are very common, some are not quite so commonly used, but they're very specific circumstances. So just play around with them and see how they work for you, okay? And you got questions, come and see us, all right?